I want everyone to imagine that you're in front of one of the most biggest and most serious tests that you're ever going to take in your life. Now, your palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, and the clock is ticking down. You have one goal: to get through all of those questions as fast as possible before that clock runs out. Now, in that rush, something happens. You make a mistake. You misread a question. You only realize it when it's too late. Does all that sound too familiar? What if I told you that something as simple as that could be prevented with something just as simple? A deep breath. 1, 2, maybe even 3 deep breaths could be the difference between success and failure. Now, we've all been in stressful situations before, whether that be a speech, a test, a job interview, you name it. These stressful situations, we shouldn't let them take control of us. Instead, we should be the ones taking control. And science tells us that we actually can take control, and it starts with something that we do every single day: breathing. Now, as an IB student, I am constantly faced with rigorous tests that are extremely time pressured. Now, one particular morning, I had a math test. I felt the stress build up the entire week leading up to that math test, but I just pushed it away and I ignored it. One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. I went into that math test, I started doing the entire test. I misread a question. I was in such a rush. I didn't see a modulus around an equation I was supposed to graph, and I got it completely wrong. The worst part is, I only realized after I handed the paper in. Now, at that point, I wasn't even mad. I was just disappointed. Not that I should have done better, but because I could have done better. I knew better. Now, later that same day, I had a physics test. And as I sat there, pencil in hand, I just thought to myself, I had a flashback of that very same test that I had that morning. And I was just, no, I don't want to think about this. And then I thought, I should do something about that. So I did something differently. I stopped, I closed my eyes, and I took a deep breath. In and out. In and out. I let my mind clear itself of all thoughts, and I just focused on what was in front of me. That was one of the best papers I've ever done, and I walked out of that test feeling super confident and with 0 regrets. Now, can you spot the difference here? What really changed? Because it was the same student, same knowledge, different breath, different outcome. Now, is this all just in my head, or am I actually getting somewhere with this? So there is actually a deeper physiological connection here that is much deeper than it looks on the surface, which I'll get into. Now, the human body has something called a nervous system. The nervous system's job is to look at the surroundings, process that information, and send little inputs to your body, to the rest of your body, on how to react to that situation. There's 2 main parts: the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Now, the sympathetic nervous system is our fight, flight, or freeze system. And our parasympathetic is our rest, digest, and process system. Now, we're going to get back to this, but for now, when we take a deep breath, our lungs send a message to our brain through our vagus nerve, which runs down our spinal cord. Now, this message is just like, hey, everything's all right, no need to worry. Then our brain transmits that to our heart, which starts beating slower, calmer. And that makes our brain stop producing as much cortisol, which you might have heard of, which I'll also get into later. Just 1 second. Now, a study conducted at Cognition and Emotion found that people who did deep breathing before one of their heavily mentally intensive tests performed 30% better than those who didn't. Afterwards, they also took an MRI scan of their brains, those who did deep breathing and those who didn't, and they found that the prefrontal cortex of those who did deep breathing was much more active. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that's in charge of concentration and decision making, so it's a very important thing, right? And now, onto the thing I mentioned before, cortisol. So when you get stressed, your brain releases a chemical. It makes you feel panicked and overwhelmed. As I said, it's called cortisol. Probably had a bit too much of that during that math test, now that I come to think about it. Now, cortisol isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be helpful in short-term situations, as it helps you quickly react to sudden changes in your environment. However, prolonged exposure to cortisol can have disastrous side effects. For example, if it's the week before a sports game or it's exam month, cortisol makes my body go completely into sympathetic nervous system, which is just fight, flight, freeze. That means extended and prolonged exposure here could lead to things like depression, anxiety, being emotionally prone, and just loss of critical thinking as a whole. The good news is, many studies have shown that deep breathing can cause these cortisol levels to drop, as I explained before, as your lungs communicate to your brain that you're not in trouble anymore. Now, this is a very, very, very important thing to note. These deep breaths, they only work if you believe in them as well. Don't just take my word for it. Look at some of the most elite professionals in the entire world. The Navy SEALs. Now, the Navy SEALs are faced with life-threatening circumstances nearly every single day, and they have to make cutthroat decisions on their feet as fast as possible. How do they do it? They use a technique called box breathing. Now, I'm going to give a quick breakdown of what box breathing is, and then we'll do a couple rounds together. Now, this is how box breathing works. You inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, then you exhale for 4 seconds through your mouth, you hold it for 4 seconds, and then you repeat the cycle. We're going to do this a total of 2 times. All right, everyone ready? Let's go. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. And again, inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Anyone felt that pressure just absolutely alleviate? Yeah? Well, if this technique works so well for these people who were, as I said, in life-threatening conditions, imagine the wonders that it could work for us in office environments, classrooms, or out on the pitch playing soccer. Now, don't just take my word for it again. Athletes all over the world use box breathing in order to calm down before sports games. Surgeons do deep breathing before life-altering operations on others. And even great mathematicians of our time use deep breathing before solving complex equations. Take Michael Phelps, one of the most decorated Olympians of all time. He credits his success to his pre-game breathing routine of all things. He doesn't credit it to his immense physical skill, but instead to his breathing. And as he says, it's just a deep breath. If you're feeling super high anxiety or frustrated, just let out a breath. And truer words could not have been spoken. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you feel stressed, whether that be during a speech, during an exam, during a presentation, a job interview, I want you to close your eyes and just breathe. Let out it. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. Repeat that a few times. See how it goes. Because it's not always about how fast you start or about how well you breathe before you begin. Thank you.